Alrighty. So let's talk lesson 20. So I read through this. Thank you for filling it out. I want to talk about the text complexity first, and then we'll dive into everything else.
Okay.
So when are you teaching this? Next Friday? Okay. Are you doing a first read day?
I wasn't gonna do a first read day because I don't think the epilogue is pretty short.
Agreed.
So I don't think that a first read is necessary. I think we could do all of the goals in a first read in the time that we have planned for reading for GIST.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about your thought process about how you're going to facilitate that.
Yes. So what we've been doing with Xavier and Drexel, for me, I've been doing oral readings for Xavier. To help support with the scaffolding and accessing the text, and then asking students what we should annotate, and having kids gist on the side, or hashtag on the side. And then the students have been able to put their gist together. For Drexel, I've been reading the first 2 pages with them of the text. Same process. What do we underline? Why are we underlining this? Why is it important? Hashtag on the side, gisting on their own. And then they continue to finish reading the rest of the text in pairs.
Okay.
And then Cornell reads on their own.
Completely independently.
Completely independently,
Okay.
yes. And so I think because of the length of the epilogue, I don't think that a first read is necessary, and that we would still have time to do the same process as we normally do reading for GIST. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 pages.
Yeah, it's not very long.
And it gives us time, actually, because we usually read 6, 7, 8 pages. It gives us time to discuss it before moving on to the reading for deeper meaning.
By asking kids what are we annotating, what have you seen from students?
I've seen where they're struggling to understand in terms of comprehension, but then also it allows me to understand what questions they have. Are they able to grasp the main idea of what it is that they're reading? So it's helped push them as well to already raise their hand and say, oh, miss, this is what we need to annotate, because they're building that habit of annotating as they're reading.
So what do you want them to annotate? Like how are they determining what to underline, what to annotate?
Yeah. So the process that we've been doing for annotations, usually when they break off to read on their own, I give them clues so that they know what they're looking for in the reading. And it helps with supporting for shortening the time for reading for GIST, and making sure that kids are able to complete it in that amount of time.
Got it.
So if I'm orally reading with them, I'll preface.
It's like a reading task.
Right, like a reading task. We're gonna read together, we're gonna gist, we're gonna hashtag. These are the 3 clues we're looking for our gist and our hashtags.
How can you make the reading focus more transferable? So instead of like Miss Peña always gives me the thing I'm looking for, like how do, even let's think like Cornell and some of your tier 1 kids and Xavier in Drexel, how can you get the reading task out of them?
I think pushing them to the focal point of the text, reminding them we learned about Claudette. The first part of the book was in terms of the action that she took to fight segregation or stand up against city bus laws, and how does the rest of the text connect to that? Because they know that she stood up, did not or refused to give up her seat on the bus, and that this is what started the fight in the civil rights movement and with Rosa Parks and everything that followed. So they know that she was before Rosa Parks, and so the rest of the book is pretty much putting into context of I guess an effect of what it was that she did.
Right. And like so, and I saw that you wrote in here that like the purpose of this entire text is like raise awareness about Claudette Colvin, because not a lot of people know who she is. So I'm hearing, and I'm going to take it even a step back further to make it super transferable, of like you're taking the content background knowledge that they learned from the text. So like the central focus of this entire text is Claudette Colvin. We know why she's important, why the book is written, and how she falls into the history of the civil rights movement.
Right.
Now I'm reading the epilogue as a student. I'm taking my background knowledge, but I'm also like looking at the text. Like I know what an epilogue is. I see that the top says history's door. I see a quote, and I see like February 2005, Booker T. Washington Magnet High School, Montgomery, Alabama. It's 2005. So like even like how would phrasing the question like I want you guys to think, one, what do you already know about Claudette and how she fits into history? And then two, what do you see on this page? What do you think our focus for reading is today? So like how would posing that question to like, let's say just Cornell, how would that, one, make it transferable for them to do outside of it, and two, just like increase the cognitive load on kids?
Right, so posing that question would force students to determine on their own what's the importance of the text that they're reading for the day. Yeah. So building those habits of like, look at the title, look at the subtitle, the quote, are you looking for important dates, the author's name, and taking that all into consideration as you're reading today's text to then be able to connect it to the prior knowledge that you have. So pushing kids before they read to look for those important clues so that it helps them determine the importance of the text.
And really stamping like the process in which they went through to get that, like all of those things you said, like really synthesizing for kids, like good readers, preview, use background knowledge, and then say to themselves, okay, as I read this, I'm looking for X.
Right.
Because I'm even looking at their benchmark, like the second passage is an excerpt from a chapter. So it says from chapter 23 of My Bondage and My Freedom. So like that tells me it's a part of a book. There's italicized paragraph, which is probably going to give me background information. So like, let me read that and then form my focus for reading based on that. You know what I mean? It's like you're teaching them to use author's tools to then like do a first read on their own.
Right. And this format on the benchmark is very similar to the civil rights address speech that Dr. King wrote that they read. Right. And then also with a lot of the chapters in Claudette, it always gives them a little preview or a little blurb before they start reading the text. Yeah.
So I think it would be interesting to see what Cornell comes up with, and like even Drexel. Like you have a lot of tier 1 like on grade level readers in that class. I think for Xavier, the scaffold you're providing are doing a lot of good if kids are able to say like, I'm underlining this because like, you're still providing a support for them, but you're making the text accessible. So I think that you can continue doing those things.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. So let's move into, I saw on here that TDQs were the thing that you kind of wanted to focus on. But let's, before we jump into TDQs, talk a little bit about like the standard itself, because it's on the benchmark like five times. And it's like in a row, right? So let's talk a little bit about the standard. One, have they seen this before? And then two, let's talk a little bit about their performance in it so far, if they have seen it.
Yes. So they have seen it before, determining the author's point of view and purpose, and then conflicting evidence or viewpoint. So the standard is kind of like twofold.
Yep.
And they've seen this a lot in the text because a lot of the lessons at the beginning of reading Claudette Colvin were asking students to determine or analyze Claudette's perspective towards a certain law versus white people during that time with segregation. So in order for them to understand that, they need to understand the conflicting viewpoints and why Claudette was against segregation. So they've seen this standard come up, and as well as providing evidence and viewpoints. A lot of, I think there's been 3 exit tickets.
Yeah, isn't that what they, well, Reasons and Evidence was MLK, right?
Yeah.
His speech, they did a lot of like, okay, that's a different standard, but still a lot of the same skills.
Yeah, still a lot of the same skills where they still need to provide evidence and they still need to determine what's conflicting and how does that support what it is that they're selecting.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk read for deeper meaning. What, walk me through just like how you want to facilitate it and how it's going to support kids kind of meeting this objective.
Sure.
So it's always vague.
It is. And so the read for deeper meaning is asking kids to scan for details about the author's purpose and point of view. Is the author trying to persuade or inform? And then what's the language or emphasis? So the read for deeper meaning chunks what they're going to need for the TDQs and the exit ticket. And it's pushing kind of like what you were saying earlier, the details and those clues that they need for author's purpose and conflicting evidence. So I think what would be really cool is either breaking kids up into pairs at tables.
Okay.
So 2 kids would do author's purpose, the other 2 kids would do the point of view.
Okay.
So the what and the why. And then having kids like share at the table what was the what was the why, how does that connect?
Okay.
And then having kids determine what in the part that they did, what's the language or what's the key words that helped you understand that this was the author's point of view and that this was his purpose for doing so.
I like that you're rooting it in the language, because I think that's so important when it comes to point of view. Like, they have to be able to pull out those key words to say, like, because the author said it this way, or use these words, or use this tone, I know X.
Right.
How are you going to, so talk to me about the thinking steps. Like, one, have you used them as written? And two, how are they going to leverage that for the Read for Deeper Meaning?
Yeah, so we've seen the thinking steps together before, and I've been trying to build it as a habit, especially with audience. We talked a lot about format and audience when we read Dr. King's speech, because they understood, initially there was a gap. They thought that he wrote the letter to Black people in general, but the civil rights address, or excuse me, the letter from Birmingham that he wrote was to specific people who were against what they were protesting. So we have reviewed format and evidence, and main idea was the author's purpose and who is this for. And so I think, again, directing students to those steps when they do the Read for Deeper Meaning is going to be helpful for determining the key words and like what's being emphasized.
Step 4 is extremely important, even flagging that for them of like, step 4 is where you're going to do most of your work and where we're going to see the objective most today. So like really paying attention to the opinion or evaluative words, what kind of language, just like the strong language, omissions, and emphasis. My other thought also is like you're doing a nice job in this meeting bringing up how they've done it in the past. Like share that with kids. Like we did this with Letter from Birmingham. Like we, like, how did we get to understand who he wrote it for and the purpose of that letter? You're doing the same skill, but we're doing it here. And that's like speaking success and challenge to kids and showing them that like they've done this before and you're just applying the same skills for different texts. I like the idea of splitting up a table and then having them share, because you're putting all of the ownership on kids, and now they have to teach each other, which is really great and will lead for a really good discussion. Are there any, like, so I feel like that will be really great with Cornell and really great with Drexel. Are there any scaffolds you need to put in place for Xavier?
Yes. So I think what I would do for Xavier is give each side, whoever's doing purpose and point of view, the clues that they're looking for to get to where they need to get to. So providing them still that scaffold, they're still doing the same activity, but they get a little bit of more hints and clues to help them get to where they need to.
You have some kids in Xavier who are, you have some kids who are tier 1. So I'm wondering also, like, could you just give the clues to the kids in Xavier who need it?
I could do that. I could also pair a tier 1 kid with another.
Because you have
student.
like Rashawn, Kyle.
I think Tanasia.
Tanasia is still tier 3 on here. You know what? Let's look at fall. Writ, because I feel like we're gonna progress test again next week, so we'll get more concrete data on their tiers. That's not what I wanted to do. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. So our babies who are more on grade level are Micah, James, Kyle, and Rashawn. Those are your 4 who are like relatively on grade level and are in the top 2 quintiles on math. Then you've got a middle bucket of kids who are like floating in the middle. So you got DJ, you got Ajane, and then Alexis. And then the babies who are, and Fasir. Those are like your 3 middle babies, and then you've got Chris, Jamad's not in this class anymore, Quadir, and Nadir, who are like on the lower end. So you could mix up the groups so that there's a support. I think that would be smart. You could do the same thing in Drexel. Because you have a lot of tier 1 kids in Drexel.
There's a lot more.
So get like really granular with mixing up the groups. There's a few kids in Drexel who did not take math, which is okay. Like Raiden. Raiden, Vincent, I know Corinne Mixtures, but Nyani, like all these babies are like solid. Like Capri's gonna need support.
Yes, she will.
Samaj won't. He's new. Samaj?
Yeah, he's new, but he won't need support.
Wonderful.
Yeah, he's fine.
And then I don't have any data for Sky.
She won't need support either.
Wonderful. Yep. So be intentional with your groupings, because that's also going to put ownership on kids. Yeah. definitely like, yeah, Drexel does not need a ton of scaffolding. There's only one.
It would just be
It's like
Capri.
2 or 3 kids in this class that really need support. Like Capri, maybe Charlie.
Julian, since he was switched.
Julian, yes, sorry, I still have the wrong.
Oh no, it's fine. And Ramad.
And Ramad. Those are your 4.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Let's focus on TDQs because that's really where you wanted to spend your energy.
Yes.
Okay. So you flagged 2 and 3 as being most aligned to the objective. So you wrote that last year the misconception was that they couldn't link Claudette in the larger picture of the civil rights movement of like the role she played or like the lack thereof of her being mentioned anywhere. So what are your thoughts around how you want to make sure you're like plugging that this year?
Yeah. So it was difficult to see that kids didn't understand the link.
Yeah.
They understood, but I think it's because of the way the information's been presented.
Okay.
So since they didn't learn about her and they learned about her now, they're thinking of her in isolation with everything else.
Okay.
So I think really stamping the link. Like, although fast forward 2005, this reporter found Claudette, was able to do his research and interview her, and she was able to break down everything that happened for her. Understanding before Rosa there was Claudette, and like remembering and stamping the differences between Claudette and Rosa and why the civil rights movement went with Rosa and not Claudette.
Yeah. That third question of what is the author's purpose for writing Claudette's story, I think is like your gateway into that. What is like a question you could pose to really stamp the link between Claudette and the civil rights movement, and like almost just like where people's focus was, like their attention at that time?
Well, I think I could ask kids, where do you think the civil rights movement was able to get the idea of having Rosa Parks do what she did?
Okay.
Like, they came up, this was strategic, right?
Yeah.
Where did they get the idea from? Who did it first? Claudette.
Right.
So if they got the idea from Claudette, does that mean they're inspired by what she did? Would she motivate them, or does it have no connection?
I like that. Even asking like how what role did Claudette play in the civil rights movement, and like how. I like how you phrase it too, though,
because they're getting stuck with thinking she's separate from everything else,
and she's really in the mix,
right?
Like really very much in the mix,
right? They need to understand that they got their idea or their strategy from Claudette.
Yeah,
even though they didn't use Claudette.
It's interesting too. Is like you're saying, like a lot of times they put her over here, like. Tell them that's what they're doing. Like you guys are thinking of her as separate. Why are you thinking of her as separate? History told us she's separate. Like they're almost like what's being projected on them is how history of this movement has been presented, and they're falling in line almost with like what they did with Claudette.
Right.
Because they did that, now we all view her as separate. When actually, we have Rosa Parks because we have Claudette.
Right.
So sharing that link between the two of them.
Okay.
I think that TDQ3 is going to be essential.
Okay.
Because like Wheatley has the exemplars being like to inform readers about an important person in civil rights history. I think we amp it up. Like that's not what you're looking for.
You haven't seen Tanisha yet, have you?
No.
Okay.
So what do you want kids to say? What would an exemplar response prove to you that they made this connection?
In a response that would prove to me that they understand.
Do you want to take a few minutes to actually like
write this down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Why don't you take like 2 minutes?
Okay.
I'm gonna check time right now actually for our meeting. Yeah, take 2-3 minutes. We still have time.
Okay.
Good?
Yes. I have 2 responses scripted.
Okay.
The first would be something along the lines of Claudette refused to give up her seat first before Rosa Parks.
Okay.
And then the second would be Claudette's actions helped the strategy for Rosa Parks and the civil rights movement.
Yeah, and then there's a section in here that talks about like why Claudette wasn't chosen, right?
Yes.
Like there's a whole, so like even having that in your back pocket of like if kids are looking at you like, be like, guys, everyone open to whatever page it is. It's after the
60.
New Highway Rights, yeah.
65.
65, okay. So like have everyone open to that and be like, let's remind ourselves of what happened. Yeah, this is like literally, she wasn't a teenager, she was hardly feisty or emotional, like all those words come up to mind again.
So I could ask, or I should pose, maybe posing the question in as twofold would help. Like, what were the differences between Rosa Parks and Claudette, and how did this influence Rosa Parks being selected to be the leader of the movement? And then the following question.
Even saying like, what message were leaders in the civil rights movement trying to send by not selecting Claudette? Like, there was a reputation that they were trying to uphold. So the exit ticket. So let's make sure that everything we're doing here is aligned to like how they're going to. Because the big thing here that we want to get at is like after this discussion, like linking it back to like why did Philip Cruz decide that this needed to be written?
Right.
So what is the author's point of view toward Claudette? Like, do you think the work that they're doing in this lesson is going to lead them to mastering the exit ticket?
I think when they're reading the epilogue, if stamping that as he was doing research on the civil rights bus boycotts, he came across Claudette and understood her importance, and then understood that history left her out, stamping that he identified that she was the first to do it.
Yeah.
To then set them up for this question, because the point of him writing this book is to show how important Claudette was to the movement.
And I think the work you have them doing, the Read for Deeper Meaning, in that first TDQ completely do that. I think TDQ 3 is just synthesizing everything for them, and really stamping the misconception you don't want them to have. So I think that that's all super aligned. And then, we briefly talked about the benchmark, but like really stamping what their brains are doing, because they have to do it like 5 or 6 times on the benchmark.
Right.
I'm gonna keep scrolling past it. Here it is. The part that we didn't talk about a lot that is revealed on the benchmark a lot is like what section of the text or what evidence reveals the author's point of view. So like that part B, cite and explain a piece of evidence that supports the answer to part A, is crucial to just seeing their trajectory of like, are they going to get this? So what are your like what exactly in the text do you want them pulling out to support that Claudette is a courageous woman who had a significant impact on the civil rights movement?
So from the text, there's a part where he talks about the way she's presented. 115.
Got it.
So though Claudette Colvin was usually presented as feisty, immature teenager who got arrested before Rosa Parks, many accounts said that Claudette was pregnant at the time that she was arrested. And then it goes on to talk about how she felt and her visiting the school that she attended where she got expelled from. So pulling out for the exit ticket, because it's asking them what's his point of view towards Claudette, and then what is a piece of evidence that supports that. So so that part talks about Claudette, but the page before it talks about the different legal cases and how some things were overshadowed by what was done previously to that. So there are a couple things that they could pick if they to support for what's the author's point of view. So on paragraph on page 114, the names, well, at the bottom where the reporter says that he finally cracked down on Claudette. Yep. So that would be the first one that they could use.
Okay.
The next one is when he calls surprised to interview her, which would be 115. And then the following one, this will be 2. And then the author's person, and then
even they're reading the author's note too, correct?
No, they're not.
They're not? Okay, because this last part here on page 119 really reveals the author's point of view of like, here's the story of a wise, brave woman who, when she was a smart, angry teenager in Jim Crow, Alabama, made contributions to human rights far too important to be forgotten. And he literally says she was wonderfully open and generous. So like, I feel like
maybe I can take that paragraph and
maybe
add
they
it
read
into,
maybe they
into the
read 113 to 116 and then flip to page 19 and read from in 14 interviews down to the bottom.
I was gonna just even like
just that paragraph,
screenshot this and then just put it on the exit ticket page.
Okay. Is that giving too much away?
It might be.
I think that might be giving too much away because it's literally that whole paragraph.
Okay. Okay, so then I'll have them just flip back. So they'll do one. Yeah.
My only concern is because this portion of the epilogue is an interview, and because we're asking about the author's point of view, we can't use anything Claudette's saying.
Right.
Because we want Philip Hughes' perspective.
Okay, so then I'll have them read 113 to 116, and then flip to 119.
Yeah, I'm thinking even like have them do what we were gonna do. Have them read 113 to 116, and then say we're gonna look at the author's note. In the author's note, Philip Hughes talks about this, this, and this. I want you to start at whatever. Even like during the following year, Claudette shared the personal history of dramatic social revolution. Start from here and read to the end, and that'll be like their read for gist. They're not reading all of the pages, but they're reading the things that they need.
Okay.
So that way, this is like super aligned to like what, like the answer to part A.
Okay.
Okay, we talked about a lot. Let's pause. What are like 2 or 3 takeaways that you have from like us planning this lesson?
Really stamping the difference between Rosa and Claudette and why she wasn't selected to be the representative of the movement, and then stamping why she. One second.
Do your thing.
Where's my document? And then stamping why the author chose to write a book on her, and like really having that link in for students, connect for students, because we were talking a lot before they think about her in isolation to the movement. So the difference between Rosa and Claudette and why she wasn't selected, understanding that what she did was what came before Rosa, or what pushed them to take that
Doesn't
strategy.
it say like she ignited the? Yeah, I remember that part.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for them to understand that she was what ignited, and then why the author wrote what he wrote.
Perfect. And then push yourself in those times when kids are making those connections to take a step back and say, this is what you're doing. You're taking what you've learned, and you're taking the clues that the author gave you, and you're determining his perspective and his point of view. That's what we do when we do when we're determining an author or narrator's point of view.
Right.
So like really pull the skill out, and like that metacognition we talked about like last year a lot, like all those metacognitive questions, like what did we just do? We just took our background knowledge on Claudette, the language that the author uses, and we made an inference on like his perspective and his point of view, and like basically why he decided that this book needed to be written.
Right.
And he interviewed her 14 times. Like that's for her, you know what I mean? Like
right.
So, making that connection for kids. Okay, so I'm gonna try and pop in for Cornell next Friday to see it.
Okay.
Because I think that's the only time I have availability. And then next week we're not meeting for a planning or data meeting because we have your formal debrief.
Okay.
But I'd love to look at this exit ticket the following Wednesday, so the 14th.
Okay.
Is when our next planning meeting is. We'll just have a data meeting instead. Because you teach it the 9th, right?
Yes.
Awesome. So do you have them do the exit ticket on the computer or on paper?
No, I always print out the multiple choice.
Okay, so just
save a couple.
save it. So sort.
Low, medium, high.
Do your sort and pull out a few.
Got it.
And then fill out the data Google Doc. Have we done that? Yes. We'll focus solely on the exit ticket for this particular meeting.
Okay.
Just because it appears so much on the benchmark, I think it's worth us having a conversation of like, where are kids and are they where they need to be?
And this is for the 14th.
The 14th, yeah.
Right.
And I'm literally putting the observation on my calendar right now for next Friday. This class starts at 3:40.
Yeah, I'll have the exit tickets hard copy so we can look at them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, is there anything else? Any other questions you have? Anything you need from me?
Nope, I
We're
think
doing
I'm.
lesson 20 exit ticket.
Yep, I think I'm all set.
Sweet.
Thank you.